Now I think you.
Okay.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Ibe, Dean of Humanities and Sciences here at Weatherford College. And today, our guest speaker is Peter Doas, Adjunct Instructor of Government here at Weatherford College and the Department Chair of the Government Government Department at TCC Northwest Campus. And the topic today will be, why did Brexit happen? And is it the first step in the demise of the European dream of integration? On that note, let me just again remind our audience, we cannot see you because you are muted. You can hear us, you can see us, but we cannot see you. And if you have questions for Peter, you are to ask those questions in the chat room, and I can relate them to him, or he will be seeing them as he continues with the presentation. And what I will do, I will let you speak, Peter, up till about into 35 minutes into your conversation. Then I will unmute myself again. When I unmute myself, it means you have about 5 more or 10 more minutes to wrap up, okay?
Okay.
Good, wonderful. So on that note, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, my name is Peter Doas, and I am an adjunct in the government department at Weatherford College, and I teach at Tarrant County College. I was actually born in Greece, and I grew up in Greece during probably one of its worst economic times in its history, and moved to the United States for economic opportunities as well as educational opportunities. And with 1981, Greece joined the European Union. And the development that took place prior to joining and then what is today is night and day. I went back, I lived in the United States in the 1980s before I went back in the 1990s, and I didn't recognize the country. Prior to the 1980s, I lived there in the 1970s. There was, and I know I came from a village outside of ancient Olympia, but we're looking at the 1970s, where that's when we got running water. That's when we got electricity. We did not have indoor plumbing. And then within a 15-year time period, thanks to joining the European Union and the investments that took place, Greece in the 1990s in the village was about the same as we are living here. It was a phenomenal change. Now, European integration has been a dream for the Europeans for thousands of years. It's not new. I'm just going to show some maps of empires that existed, attempted to unify Europe. And again, there's many more, but whether we go back to the Roman Empire and year or decade or century after century afterwards, to the Byzantine Empire, to the reign of Charlemagne and continuation with the Holy Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire in the 15, 16, 17, 1800s, Napoleon's attempt in the 19th century, fascist Germany in the 1900s, and the Soviet bloc, the attempt for the Soviet Union to combine the European, Eastern and Central European states within the military alliance of the Warsaw Pact and the economic alliance of Comecon. There have been attempts to unify or at least integrate Europe. Now, the one common characteristic among all of these attempts, including the Soviet Union's economic alliance with Central and Eastern Europe, was that it was forceful integration. People, societies, countries do not like to be forced to do something. Even if it's in their best interest, they feel that it's a violation of their sovereignty. And all of these attempts were, for the long term, were not successful. They were forcing countries to join politically, economically, rather than allowing countries to do so on their own. Now, the European Union today looks like this. We can see that it has grown tremendously from the early 1950s until today. And we have to remember, this has been a 70-year with the early beginnings of pre-European Union attempts in the 1950s. It's been a 70-year time span. And during the 70 years, they've had tremendous growth, not only economic union among the various countries, but growth in the number of countries and growth towards political union as well. Prior to the United Kingdom, prior to Great Britain leaving the European Union, it consisted of 28 countries. It had a population of over 500 million people. Today, with Europe and minus Great Britain, consists of 27 countries, approximately 450 million people. And it has, if we're looking at the economy of Europe within the European Union, it has one of the largest economies. The United States, and these are in front of you, figures for projected 2021 GDP. The United States is projected to have a GDP of almost 23 million people. And again, these are projections. The European Union, without Great Britain, is projected to have a GDP of over 23 trillion for the United States, over 17 trillion for the European Union, and China very close at almost 17 trillion. So it is a formidable economic power, competitive to the other economic powers that exist in the international community. Before we can really talk about why Great Britain left, we should talk about the reasons why the European Union was created. We're looking at the post-World War II period. Their economies were devastated. There were threats from political threats and military threats from communist bloc nations and communist parties within Europe. And they realized to prevent political collapse, one way would be to invest in their economies to lead to economic recovery and growth. Another reason is that they just had fought two major wars. And often we associate these wars, these world wars, as a continuation of this hostility between France and Germany. They did not want to have to go through something like this again. And our view was that if we can integrate Europe, particularly the French and the Germans, where their economies are so intertwined, where they're so dependent on each other, where war would be economic collapse for both, it would hopefully prevent another hostility between France and Germany and a wider conflict between the other European countries. And on that part, it has been successful. The last 70 years has been the longest span of time where we haven't seen a major conflict among the European powers in European history. There was also a desire to form an economic union because Germany, because of World War II, lacked political influence, lacked political power, and it was looking to form alliances, unions, some form of cooperation with any country to be accepted back into these family of nations. So Germany was looking for political reasons. France did not have economic strength. It lacked the economic power to be a competitive power in the international community. It did develop nuclear weapons. It had a military, but it needed the economic power that comes along with a country to promote its influence in the international community. So you had these two giants in Europe, one an economic power, one a political power and military power, that were looking to fuse or to integrate to become an even more important, an even more powerful entity in the international community. And you also have the smaller countries. They weren't competitive. They needed a larger economy for economic growth and for political influence in the international community. So in the post-World War II period, you had all of these variables coming together towards unity, towards integration. And each country had their own reasons. And it wasn't just one reason, multiple reasons, but each one had its own dominant reason for wanting to integrate. And it was a peaceful integration. They weren't looking to have forceful integration the way that the Soviet bloc did with Central and Eastern Europe, but peaceful integration, open to each country that was willing and accepting this form of integration. And it took time, and there were many steps along. The European Union that we know today is the child of attempts and other treaties that existed prior to the European Union. We saw in the 1940s and 1950s, 6 countries forming the European Coal and Steel Community. This took place with the Treaty of Paris, and it was an attempt to unify their industrial production. It created more or less a neighborhood of countries to coordinate their economies in this specific area, to work together to promote their industrial growth. We saw the European Coal and Steel Community growing through the Treaty of Rome, creating a customs union. And it was known as the European Economic Community. It had an external tariff. So now they're unifying their economies a little bit more, where they're going to have a common tariff policy. They worked at creating a common agricultural policy, as well as other areas. And we started seeing a tremendous increase in membership, a desire for other countries to join. It was showing success, and success will bring other European countries, would bring others within Europe wanting to be part of that success. And as we can see here, as the decades go by, little by little, more and more countries becoming members of the European Union. Now, the European Union actually came into existence. It's the child of the European Economic Community, came into existence with the Maastricht Treaty in 1992. We went in Europe beyond economic cooperation, beyond economic integration, towards political integration. Europe took baby steps, little by little, showing that early economic customs union, economic integration benefited the countries, and they started testing the waters towards political integration. The European Union created a European citizenship. I'm a dual citizen. I'm a U.S. naturalized citizen, but I'm also a Greek citizen. And as a Greek citizen, I'm a European citizen, a member of the European Union. A common passport associated with the European Union. I can live in any European country that is a member of the European Union. I can work in any country that is a member of the European Union. So they started creating a true European citizen, a voluntary means of integration. They started under the European Union promoting also a security policy, a common foreign policy. They created a common judicial institution and system for the members of the European Union to deal with any grievances that they might have. So we started in the 1990s up until today, not only an economic integration taking place in Europe, but also a political movement, political integration taking place in Europe. This expanded with the Lisbon Treaty in 2007. With the 1992 treaty that established the European Union, countries have to give up some sovereignty to be part of a bigger organization. But with the 1992 Maastricht Treaty, countries had a veto power of what was taking place within the European Union. In other words, Greece could have prevented policy from being implemented because each country that was a member had a veto power. With the Lisbon Treaty, they tried to change this, where instead of one country that is a member of the European Union controlling what the other, currently 27 total countries, what the other countries were able to do, they started creating, similar to our system, where in the United States, our federal system, where states are still influential. States can still dominate and influence policy being created at the federal level. Europe started doing the same thing. With 2007, giving more authority, more power to this supranational organization known as the European Union, with safeguards still existing within each member state, but not a veto power where one country can completely prevent policy. Now, countries still have a veto power in certain areas, but not over all policy that is made within the European Union. And the outcome, with step-by-step, beginning from the 1950s up until the 21st century, was a stronger, a more unified Europe, unified economically, but now unified politically. Europe is not a United States of Europe the way that we are in the United States, but it is more unified today than we were, at least in my opinion, and we can back this up, more unified today than we were under the Articles of Confederation. And if the recession of 2007, 2008 had not taken place, where it kind of slowed things down, Europe would have been even more unified today than it actually is. This movement towards political unification has grown, has taken roots in Europe, and I'll expand on this as well. Now, Great Britain is a country that in the 1940s and 50s didn't look towards European integration as its best interest. And it did this for a number of reasons. Number one, Great Britain was not part of continental Europe. Great Britain still viewed itself as a power. It did not want to associate itself, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but these countries within continental Europe that had been devastated, countries that had lost the conflict during World War II to Nazi Germany. And it didn't believe that this integration would develop much. In other words, that it would not take root. And for other reasons, and we'll expand on those other reasons as well, it decided not to join the European Union, or at that time period, the early stages of the European Union. By the 1960s, Great Britain experienced some economic difficulties. As an individual country, it was not able to be as competitive. It saw the economic growth that was taking place within the European Economic Community, and it realized that they need to get on board. The problem was that in the 1960s, there was some animosity against British admission to the European Economic Community from France. President Charles de Gaulle at that time was not supportive of the British for a variety of reasons. Number one, competition, political competition, because France dominated the system. And on two attempts that Great Britain made to join the European Union, France vetoed their attempts. After Charles de Gaulle, President de Gaulle, resigned, things started changing, and Great Britain was admitted in 1973. This lack of joining early on created problems for the British. And again, as we're moving forward, we'll talk about some of those problems. Now, Great Britain, in an attempt to create a competitive system to the European Economic Community, started promoting what became known as the European Free Trade Association. It brought other countries in. This was not the European Economic Community. This was more or less similar to NAFTA in the United States, and today the American, Mexico, Canada integration that Donald Trump promoted, and we saw some changes to NAFTA. So Great Britain started promoting a customs union, and Great Britain and some other countries, originally 7, created a customs union. This European Free Trade Association could not compete with the European Economic Community. It still exists today, but it's not as competitive. It's not as economically influential as the European Union is today. And we saw by the 1970s, little by little, countries leaving the European Free Trade Association and joining the European Union. They moved from one to the other because they saw the economic opportunities were greater within the European Union, including Great Britain itself. And today, we can see that the European Free Trade Association has 4 countries. It still exists, but it's not an economic power. So Great Britain joining in the 1970s and in the 1980s and afterwards as a member started participating, saw the advantages, economic advantages of the European Union, and was an active member. But some changes took place. Now, Margaret Thatcher was a Prime Minister of Great Britain from the 1979 until 1990, a conservative Prime Minister. And she gave a speech in 1988, and she warned against the creation of a European superstate. She was concerned about a loss of sovereignty for Great Britain. She spoke out against further integration. Many believe that this was the beginning of the movement for Brexit. By 1990, we saw an attempt to establish a movement to slow down European integration within Great Britain, that is, and to get Great Britain out of the European Union. Now, there are many reasons why Great Britain felt like the odd person out. it never felt like a true partner within the European Union. Number one, how it was treated by France. Number two, entering later on, where it wasn't there in the beginning to really build a foundation, to build strong roots within the movement. Great Britain has been more supportive of intergovernmental cooperation among countries more than supranational authority. It does not, or it did not, support this movement in the 1990s with the Maastricht Treaty to create an economic and a political alliance. It was okay with economics, but a political alliance felt that it went against its best interests. And the fact that Great Britain was not part of continental Europe, had been outside of the beginnings of the European Union, it made it feel more like an outside cousin rather than a full family member within Europe. Because Great Britain was less enthusiastic towards political integration, it did not actively participate. It was not an active member in forging the movement towards political integration. It was more of a spoiler. It attempted to slow down integration, and this created some hostility among the other countries, particularly France and Germany. And it did not take a leadership role. Rather than providing alternatives, maybe less political integration type alternatives, it was just the country that was saying no, no, no. It would oppose change. And rather than leading, it fought politically against the others, trying to slow this movement towards integration, or at a minimum, it remained neutral rather than taking a leading role. By Great Britain taking a more neutral position, not taking a leading role, all that did was allow France and Germany to create a stronger bond, stronger influence within the European Union, and to dominate the European Union, particularly after the 1990s, including up until today. Those two countries are the dominant players, politically and economically, but also when it comes to a leadership position, they dominate the system. Now, there were other reasons why Europe did not feel that it was in its best interest to continue to be a member of the European Union. There was lower levels of support among the public compared to other countries, the population of other countries, towards European integration. The British were not as knowledgeable about the EU compared to other countries. Number one, because the government was not as supportive for further integration. The British really did not feel as united towards European identity the way other countries were uniting towards this European identity. And the British viewed their sovereignty, particularly because of their culture, their history, as being more important compared to giving up some of their sovereignty towards a political union. There were other reasons as well. In Great Britain, the two dominant political parties, the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, there were factions within both parties, strong factions, that opposed European integration. So political leadership and economic leadership in Great Britain was pushing the brakes towards integration. The media was also not as enthusiastic. They were not as supportive towards political integration. This created a movement, a new political party in the 1990s, a party that was against integration, wanted to hold back or at least put the brakes on further integration, and if necessary, to take Great Britain out of this movement. Imagine having, equivalent to the United States, having talk radio, social media, major news networks coming out against something that would be taking place in our country. It would influence citizens. It would influence political leaders as well. And this is what was taking place in the 1990s and then the decades after within Great Britain. There are other reasons why Great Britain felt compelled to leave the European Union. They believed that it was not providing the economic benefits that they had envisioned. They felt that they were paying more into the European Union in taxes than they were receiving in benefits. Another reason, the recession of 2007, 2008, Great Britain was against the policies that were implemented by the European Union. And many people would agree that what took place, the economic policies to deal with the recession that took place in 2008, were the wrong policies by the European Union. And I'll expand on this in a little bit. There was also a concern about immigration. We saw wars taking place, economic issues taking place in the Middle East and in Africa, a growth of immigration, particularly through Italy and Greece. Germany was open to this immigration, supportive of it. And then Great Britain could not control the people entering Great Britain with this immigration, growth in immigration that took place from the Middle East and from Africa. They felt that their sovereignty was being diminished. So for these political reasons, economic reasons, as well as their expectations not having been met, it really started a movement by the beginning of the 21st century, after the first decade, 2010, 2012, a movement towards Brexit. Now, if we take a look, and I'm going to mention the economic, and there's a reason I'm going to mention this, but if we take a look at the economic policy of the European Union. Now, when we experience this recession and COVID today, our government lowered taxes to stimulate economic growth, spending. Our government today gave stimulus checks out to stimulate spending. The European Union's effort was different. And I'll use an example. Countries that experience economic difficulties, the European Union said, we will bail you out, but you're going to do what we tell you to do. And Greece is an example. They went and told the Greeks, number one, raise your taxes so you can raise money to cover your own expenses rather than in continued bailouts, contrary to what we did here. Number two, they told the Greeks to cut your expenses, cut services, contrary to what we did here, where we increased unemployment compensation to individuals to deal with a crisis. They told the Greeks, and this was to other countries as well, not just to Greece, but I'm using Greece as an example. They told the Greeks, lay off people in the public sector. And the only way that Greece could receive this bailout, which was primarily from the European Union, although some of it was from the IMF, was to implement these policies. So the Greek government increased taxes, they cut spending, they laid off government employees. And this just aggravated the economic problems within the country. And there was a referendum that actually took place in Greece in 2015, where the Greek people voted, don't accept any more bailouts. We can't continue with these policies that are being implemented, policies that were created by the European Union. So Europe was actually promoting policies that did not promote economic growth compared to the policies that we promoted in the United States. And many will validate that it created more problems. It slowed down the economic recovery that could have taken place with that recession compared to us. We much more quickly were able to deal with economic crisis with our policies compared to the European Union, which their policies literally acted as a brake. And for all of these reasons, Great Britain said, enough's enough. This is not working out for the political, economic issues dealing with immigration. Imagine, because that's what a federal system of government is. It's a marriage. But instead of between consenting adults, it's between consenting countries. And the European Union might not be the federal system that we have in the United States, but it's heading towards that. It's also a marriage. Now imagine a marriage where one partner is not as enthusiastic to be married, the way that Great Britain was really not that as enthusiastic to be part of the European Union. Imagine, just like the elites, political, economic elites, and the media in Great Britain were not as supportive of integration, imagine if a person's, within their marriage, if a person's family and friends were not supportive of that marriage. Imagine if the actions of the partner of one of the individuals within that marriage did not financially benefit that relationship. Imagine if that partner in this marriage interfered in the control of the domestic environment. Maybe having in-laws staying over, and I'm not, I'm married. I'm okay with my in-laws. I don't have a problem. But I'm just saying, having in-laws staying over, allowing friends to interfere in this relationship, that one partner is going to start looking at it and saying, what am I getting out of this? I'm not really that enthusiastic to be here to begin with. I'm not getting an economic benefit out of this. My spouse is allowing others to influence my relationship here. Why am I here? They will start thinking about what is in their best interest. And this is what took place within Great Britain. Now, in 2016, the British government agreed to a referendum. It was a non-binding referendum, whether or not to stay within the European Union. And 52% voted to leave the European Union. Even though it was legally not a binding referendum, Great Britain decided to move forward and leave the European Union. Now, the year before this, in 2015, there was a referendum that took place in Greece, not to leave the European Union, but to decline the bailout terms. This would have literally created a collapse of the economic system within Greece, and the government knew this. But the Greek citizens were also upset for many of the same reasons that the British were. And in Greece, that referendum was much higher. Over 60% of the people voted no more bailouts. We do not want to participate in these economic policies that the European Union is imposing. But unlike the British government that moved forward and agreed to leave the European Union, the Greek government decided not to honor the referendum. And they continued the bailout and today are still members of the European Union. And last year, January 2020, Great Britain actually left the European Union. Now, this was not the first time. When we look at Brexit, we say, oh my goodness, a country left. Is this the end of the European Union? But it's not the first time. Greenland, which is a part of Denmark, due to some economic issues dealing with fishing rights, decided to leave the European Union in 1982. It's not a major power, it's not a major country, and it's part of a country, but it decided to exit the European Union. So there was precedent before Great Britain. Norway negotiated to join the European Union in 1973, which is a member of the European Free Trade Association, to join with Great Britain. But a referendum in 1972, 54% voted against membership. So even though it was invited to join, it decided not to join. It honored the wishes of the citizens. Norway was asked again in the 1990s to join. Again, the majority of the residents, the citizens of Norway, voted against membership. Although it was not a member of the European Union, it voted against becoming a member of the European Union. And for many of the same reasons as Great Britain, it was concerned about its sovereignty. Now, does it mean that because Great Britain left, does it mean that we're going to see an exodus among other countries in the European Union? It's possible. Unlike our country, our union, the federal system where our states cannot leave, European states can leave. They weren't sure exactly how it would take place. That's why there were some concerns with Great Britain. But if they want to leave, they can leave. But countries join for a variety of reasons. And the reasons that other countries join were not always exactly the same for the reasons that Great Britain joined. Growth of the European Union has brought peace to Europe. There's no question about that. There has been political stability. There haven't been military conflicts to the level among the major powers. We had conflicts in Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, in the 1990s and even a little bit afterwards, but not the conflicts that existed prior. A history of hostility between France and Germany has ended. It has created from hostile members of Europe to cooperating members of Europe, allies, and not just within a military alliance in NATO, but in this economic and political alliance within a European Union. It has brought economic growth. I explained or I mentioned about Greece, where I went back in the 1990s, where the homes were no different than we are today, where we had horses to do farm work up until the 1970s when I left. By the 1990s, it was a developed economy. So it brought economic prosperity to countries such as Greece, countries such as Portugal, countries in Central Europe with a collapse of the communist bloc. It brought political power. Europeans view themselves, in other words, they're not a United States, but their membership, the European countries and citizens, as members of the European Union, view themselves as a political power. we're maybe surpassing the influence that the United States might have in the international community. Europe has common foreign policy. It involves itself what's going on in the Middle East, in Africa, in Asia, its relationship to other powers. Each one of those member countries could not do this on their own. But within this union, they have become a political influence, a strong political voice within the international community. It has brought political stability. Greece joined the European Union in 1981 after experiencing military dictatorship in the 60s and early 70s, mid 70s. And it looked at membership to the European Union as a means of stabilizing its political system, and it worked. Spain and Portugal joined in the 1980s for the same reason. Membership to the European Union brought political stability to prevent, because they had experienced military dictatorships, to prevent the military from taking over again. It worked for Spain and Portugal. Italy was concerned in the 1940s and 50s of the Communist Party actually winning an election and taking over. The unstable governments that existed early on in its history, it brought political stability to Italy. And then with the collapse of the Eastern Bloc nations, communism, and the Soviet Union, those countries were concerned. European Union membership brought political and economic stability to them. It brought also an alliance to prevent potential hostility from Russia. The last thing that Russia or outside countries would want to do is interfere or use military action against a European Union country. So it brought this type of stability to Central and also Eastern European countries. It did create a European identity. Now, when I grew up in Greece, it was not a member of the European Union. I viewed myself as Greek. I was socialized as being Greek. My father was the oldest of his siblings, so my brother and I were the oldest of my cousins. My cousins over there started school or finished their education in the public school system in the 1980s and 1990s, where they were socialized to view themselves as Europeans, and they actually do view themselves as Europeans. I left, and I have that same type of mentality, being Greek. My cousins, when I went over there in the 1990s, called me a dinosaur, and they felt that I'm from the past. Even though I might have only been 6 to 8 to 10 years in age difference with my cousins, I identify with my uncles and aunts in the older generation because of my socialization that took place. The younger generation in Greece and in other countries view themselves as European. They still have a Greek identity, but they view themselves as European as well. And this is promoting further integration. And as future generations take shape in Europe, it will continue. When we take a look at our own level of integration, it took place decade after decade after decade. Early on, even under the US Constitution, but particularly under the Articles of Confederation, the states dominated. The national government was limited in what it could do under the Articles of Confederation, very limited. Even early on in our history, we saw states dominating under the Constitution. But as every decade went by, as the national government started promoting stronger political influence in our union, as events forced the states to be more dependent on the national government, similar to the economic dependence that is taking place within the European Union, we saw the national government dominating here. Will this type of growth of integration take place in the European Union? I don't know. But it is taking place right now. Will it one day become the United States of Europe? Again, I do not know. But it is a dream of Europeans to have a United States of Europe. It's been a dream for thousands of years. And the European Union is allowing the Europeans to freely choose to be part of this union rather than previous attempts where there was forceful integration. And this combination of this socialization process taking place towards European identity, the political movement where Europeans look themselves now as a power, not to the level of the United States, but getting there. The economic benefits of integration, this combination of variables, even with Brexit, is continuing. Where many people are married, but once in a while a divorce takes place. It does not end the institution of marriage. We fought a civil war. We almost broke apart as well. But we grew out of it. And in my opinion, I do not believe that Brexit will be the end of European integration. The Europeans have way too much to lose. And the benefits of continued European integration far outweigh the costs. Now, Great Britain, the citizens viewed it a little bit differently, but it would be interesting to see if another referendum would take place today, whether that small majority that supported Brexit would still support it today. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you very much, Peter. That was quite informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I invite the attendees, the audience, if they have questions, to please forward their questions on the chat room. Well, any question? That was well done. I know I know Greece, has a history of its own, and people look at Greece, Italy as the cradle of civilization. Yet, they lag behind a little bit in terms of development with the rest of the European nations until the integration, that integration brought them now at equal level with the rest of the European countries. So I think the integration is a good thing. It is a good thing for Greece as well as for the rest of the European countries. And,
yes, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
And then, of course, as you alluded to, the power, in terms of economic, political, as well as military power, are very beneficial, not only to the European countries, but also to the United States, that those countries are together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's given the United States a strong ally. I want to mention something else. Now, Eastern Europeans joined and Central Europeans joined the European Union because they were concerned about Russia, potentially Russia invading. As I mentioned, Russia is not going to invade a European Union member country. I do not believe it's not going to take that risk. Greece feels threatened from Turkey, that is not a member of the European Union, wants to be a member, but does not, it's not a member yet. Turkey would have invaded those islands that are close to the Turkish coastline. The only reason Turkey has not invaded those islands is because it does not want to have to deal with the European Union, because Europe made it very clear, Greek borders are European Union borders. This level of protection, at least the identity, has created a strong identity to remain in the European Union. not only the economic benefits, but the political and national security benefits of European integration is creating a stronger and stronger bond among these countries.
Very, very well said. Very well said. And again, thank you so very much. I know our attendees do have to attend other sessions in about 7 minutes. So if you don't have any other question, I would say thank you to everyone and thank you to Peter. And
Can I answer? There are a few questions. Yes, Greece is part of the European Union today. Even though the citizens in 2015 voted for the government not to accept the bailouts, if the government had not accepted the bailouts, if they had listened to the citizens when they said not to accept the bailouts, Greece is also a member of the euro. It uses the euro, and the euro would not have been able to be used, and Greece potentially could have moved towards its version. And they actually called it at that time Grexit. Instead of Brexit, they called it Grexit. So it is a member of the European Union, and it was a good decision of the government, I hate to say this, not listening to the people, because it overcame the economic crisis. It still has a lot more to do, but it overcame the economic crisis. The differences between my cousins
could you answer yes.
The difference between my cousins and myself are phenomenal. In other words, they view themselves as European. And there's another reason why. My cousins and other Greeks, they look at the European Union and say, well, you know what? You're just a continuation of us. We're Western civilization, and your foundation is based on the Greek, in other words, foundation. Western civilization, in reference to how the Greeks view it, is Greek civilization. So we have a right to be here. And not only that, we are more influential because our culture and our history is influencing this establishment.
Very interesting. All right. Again, I thank you so much for the...
Yes, one last question I'll answer. The countries have capitalist economic systems, but just like us, there's differences between the Republicans and the Democrats. Some call democratic policies being socialist. They're stronger government influence and government involvement in the economy between a Democrat and a Republican. And the Europeans have the same thing. Now, in Greece, it's a conservative administration that controls the government today, but it's had a socialist administration that supported capitalism, just more government involvement in the economy. So their capitalist economic systems, even though they might have more government involvement, more liberal policies compared to what we have in the United States.
Yeah, and it's a good thing to remind folks too that Britain is a socialist country,
Yes, yeah. I hate to say this, the conservative government, the conservative political party in Greece is closer to the Joe Biden administration than it is to the Republican Party. They call themselves conservative because they do have certain conservative values, but it's not to the type of conservative ideology that we have in the United States. It's more of a moderate policy compared to a conservative policy.
Very well said. Thank you. All right. Well, I guess it is that time. It's almost 4 minutes to 2, and we are going to move on into the next session. Again, thank you so much, Peter, for making this enjoyable for all. And
thank you.
It's nice seeing you in person. Of course, I've known you. I've heard of your name so many times for a long time, and it's good to be with you this afternoon.
Same here. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.